Imagine this. It's very early in the morning. The garage door slowly rolls up and a long, low, almost ground-hugging silhouette glides out. A sharp, shark-like nose, a massive V8 breathing under the hood, and at the back, that small Maserati Trident badge. Today's guest, the 1972 Maserati Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupé. This is not a technical catalog. We're going to talk about why this car is so special, how it was born, and why it's not just a collection of numbers, but a machine that carries a real story and a soul. Late in the 1960s, there was a war going on between the Italian car brands. On one side, Ferrari, on the other, Lamborghini. In the shop windows, you saw Daytonas, Muras, and Maserati was looking for a new way forward with its big V8s coming from the racetracks. Being fast only on the circuit was no longer enough. Maserati wanted to be in the garages of wealthy customers and out on the roads as a fast, noble grand tourer. That's where the Ghibli story begins. Maserati started a brand new GT project with the internal code AM115, and for the design they worked with a young, wildly talented name, Giorgetto Giugiaro. At the time he was at Ghia, and even today, this car is considered one of the true high points of his career. At the 1966 Turin Motor Show, on the Ghia stand, there was a car almost glued to the floor. Low, with a flat nose, a long hood, and a body that looked ready to leap forward. The name of that concept was Ghibli. Maserati loved wind names in that era. Ghibli is the name of a hot, dry, harsh wind that blows from the Libyan desert. When visitors at the show first saw the car, they were shocked. At the beginning, it was meant to be just a show car, but the reactions were so strong that Maserati made a clear decision. All right, we're putting this car into production. Production began in 1967. First, the standard Ghibli came out with a 4.7-liter V8, but the real legend would walk onto the stage later, the SS 4.9. When you first see a Ghibli, the first thought that comes to mind is simple. This car looks angry. Its height is about 1.16 meters, lower than many modern sports cars. The hood feels almost endless. The cabin is pushed far back, and the rear end is cut off with an elegant line. At the front, there are pop-up headlights. When they're closed, the nose is completely flat and sharp. When they flip up, that iconic late 60s and 70s headlight look suddenly appears. In Giugiaro's mind, this wasn't a pure supercar. He wanted to draw a long-distance monster, a GT for serious journeys, and he succeeded. From the side, the glass area is very slim, almost like a ledge. Most of what you see is a large metal surface. That gives the car both an aggressive and a very elegant character. The legendary Maserati-branded magnesium wheels, the low planted stance, and that almost ground-level hood line. To make all this possible, they had to place the engine very low. At this point, Maserati's experience with race cars came into play. Under the Ghibli skin lies a V8 block whose roots go back to Maserati's 1950s 450S race cars. That engine later found its way into the Quattroporte as well, but in the Ghibli there was a different secret, a dry-sump lubrication system. Thanks to that, they could mount the engine much lower, close to the front axle line, and that's how they achieved that incredibly low hood profile. The first Ghiblis came with a 4.7-liter V8 producing around 310 horsepower, but Maserati didn't leave the story there. In 1969, they introduced a wilder version called SS. They increased the stroke, took the displacement up to 4.9 liters, lifted the power to around 335 horsepower and torque to roughly 480 newton meters. Top speed? The period sources I've looked at talk about 260 to 280 kilometers per hour. At the time, Maserati proudly said, "This is the fastest road car we have ever built." 0 to 100 kilometers per hour is in the 6 to 7 second range. Compared to today's supercars, that might look slow. But remember, this is the early 1970s, a fully metal, heavy grand tour. Think about the tires, the roads, the brakes of that era. All of them were far behind what we have today. Our main character, the 1972 Maserati Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupé, represents the mature stage of this model. In 1970, the Ghibli received a small facelift. By '72, with refreshed headlight surrounds, updated interior, and some ergonomic tweaks. A slightly different kind of legend was on the road. When you sit inside, you're greeted by pure 1970s Italian luxury, fully leather-trimmed seats, a wood-rimmed steering wheel, an analog clock placed in the center of the dash. And for that era, impressively equipped standard features like air conditioning, power windows, and long-distance comfort details. Unlike rivals such as Ferrari and Lamborghini, the Ghibli was set up to be a bit more usable as an everyday GT. Yes, the engine is very powerful and very thirsty, but Maserati thought about that too. The car has two 50-liter fuel tanks, filled from separate caps on each side. On a long trip, you run one tank down, then keep going with the other. Now let's go on an imaginary test drive together. You turn the key. First, you hear the soft whine of the fuel pumps, then suddenly that big V8 wakes up. Even at idle, the whole car gently trembles. As you try to take in that sensation, the sound from the exhaust is nothing like the electronically designed noise of modern sports cars. This sound is completely mechanical, completely real, and it stirs something inside you. In the first meters, the steering feels heavy. The wide front tires and the character of the hydraulic system of that era make you work a little at low speeds. But as you pick up speed, the steering lightens, and despite that long nose, the car feels surprisingly balanced. The Ghibli is not a pure track toy. Its mission is different. To drive for hours and days on end. There's a 5-speed ZF manual gearbox. Even at low revs, there's plenty of torque. Once you slot it into third gear, you can handle almost everything. Out on the highway, revs are low and speed is high. It has the full character of a grand tour. The brakes are, of course, old by modern standards. That's why when you drive a Ghibli fast, you always have to think a little ahead. But a part of the magic is right there. This car keeps you fully engaged in the driver's seat. It doesn't forgive your mistakes. When the Ghibli stepped onto the stage, its rivals were truly strong. Ferrari 365 GTB/4 Daytona, Lamborghini Miura, Aston Martin DBS V8, all very serious names. And yet the Ghibli's design and character were loved so much that, in its time, it actually outsold many of its rivals and brought Maserati a serious dose of prestige. Of course, Maserati's image was just as important as the design. The Ghibli was a full-on leading actor of a car. Among the famous names who sat behind its wheel were Jean-Paul Belmondo, Sammy Davis Jr., Henry Ford II, Peter Sellers, and more. So Ghibli gained its value not only through its technical features, but also through the culture built around it. Now we come to the heart of the matter. Why is the SS 4.9 Coupé talked about so much? There are a few reasons. 1. Performance. The 4.9-liter 5.8 produces around 335 horsepower and serious torque. For that period, a top speed in the 270 to 280 kilometers per hour range is a big number, and a new peak for Maserati. 2. Rarity. Total Ghibli production is around 1,100 to 1,170 coupes and about 125 spiders. Within that, the SS 4.9 powered versions are even more limited. Different sources mention between 250 and 425 SS coupes. So the 1972 Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupé is the high-performance version of an already rare model. 3. A late-run car. Ghibli production ended in 1973, and the model handed its place over to the Compson. That means a 72 SS is very close to the peak of the series in both performance and design, and it belongs to the final years of production. In today's collector's market, a good Ghibli SS 4.9 is priced in the same league as major classic Ferraris and Lamborghinis. For example, a 1972 Ghibli SS Coupé found buyers in the $300,000 to $400,000 range at big auctions like Pebble Beach in the mid-2000s. Let's be honest for a second. This car is not just made of glossy brochure pages, a big V8 with 4 Weber carburetors. Finding a mechanic who truly knows how to tune it is very hard. Even back then, fuel consumption was considered high. Today, it's almost symbolic. Spare parts, body panels, and interior trim pieces are not easy to find. And classic Italian electrics have personality. Sometimes they work because they like you, sometimes purely on their own mood. But that's exactly why collectors are in love with this car. Because the Ghibli is a character you have to live with, including its flaws. It's the early 1970s. The oil crisis is knocking at the door, emissions regulations are tightening, and the era of big V8s is slowly being questioned. Maserati is not immune to this storm. In 1973, Ghibli production ends, and it hands over the stage to the Bertone-designed Compson. The Ghibli, on the other hand, leaves behind a very clear legacy. It lifted Maserati's design language to a higher level. It put the brand on the same playing field as Ferrari and Lamborghini, and maybe most importantly, it took the idea of the Italian Grand Tour to a completely new level. When you look at a Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupé today, you're not just seeing an old car. You're seeing the speed, luxury, and design mindset of an entire era, and the dreams, fears, and passions of the people who lived in that time. Now, at the end of the video, let me ask you a small question. If today, right in front of you, there was a 1972 Maserati Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupe, and someone handed you the keys, where would you drive first? A coastal road, a mountain pass, or an empty highway at midnight? And how many minutes would you drive with the radio completely off, just listening to the sound of that V8? For me, the Ghibli is not just a good-looking old Italian car. This car is a thin line. On one side, race-bred engineering. On the other, the lives of movie stars, business people, and collectors. And in the middle, there is a very rare kind of soul that still affects us today. And that's why the 1972 Maserati Ghibli SS 4.9 Coupe is a story that absolutely deserves to be told here on Stories of Classic Souls.